Is it true that rapture will take place at Pentecost? The concept of the rapture and its timing is a topic of interpretation and belief within various Christian denominations. While some individuals and groups believe that the rapture will occur during the Feast of Pentecost, also known as the Feast of Weeks or the Feast of Harvest or Wine, it is important to note that this belief is based on theological interpretations and not on concrete, verifiable proof. As such, I can provide you with some information and arguments that are often presented in support of the idea that the rapture will happen during the Feast of Pentecost, but it's important to approach this subject with an open mind and recognize that different interpretations exist. 1. Symbolism and Typology. Those who support the idea of the rapture occurring at the Feast of Pentecost often point to the symbolic and typological significance of this feast. In the Old Testament, the Feast of Pentecost was a significant agricultural festival. It marked the completion of the grain harvest and was also associated with the giving of the law to Moses on Mount Sinai. In Exodus 19 and 20, God's presence descended on Mount Sinai accompanied by fire, smoke, and the sound of thunder. The children of Israel heard God's voice and were justly afraid for their lives. God gave them the 10 Commandments and began the process of communicating to Moses the rest of his law, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Proponents of the Feast of Pentecost rapture theory argue that this feast holds symbolic and typological significance for the rapture. They see the church, as the bride of Christ, being prepared and gathered during the present age, similar to the agricultural harvest that occurred during Pentecost. Just as the harvest was a time of celebration and gathering, they believe the rapture will be the ultimate gathering of believers into the presence of Christ. They draw a parallel between the themes of the feast, such as harvest and gathering, and the concept of the rapture event. 2. Biblical Numerology. Numerology, the study of numbers in relation to spiritual or symbolic meanings, is often invoked in discussions about the timing of the rapture. Proponents of the Feast of Pentecost rapture theory highlight the significance of the number 50, which is associated with Pentecost. They argue that this number has symbolic importance based on its occurrence throughout the Bible. In the Old Testament, every 50th year was designated as a Jubilee year, a time of release and liberation. According to Leviticus 25 verse 10, during the Jubilee, debts were cancelled, slaves were set free, and property was returned to its original owners. Some believers see the rapture as the ultimate liberation of believers from the bondage of sin and the world, and they associate this liberation with the Jubilee symbolism. Thus, they suggest that the timing of the rapture aligns with the idea of Jubilee and freedom represented by the number 50, which corresponds with the Feast of Pentecost. 3. Jewish wedding imagery. Another argument presented is that the Feast of Pentecost aligns with Jewish wedding imagery and customs. Jewish wedding customs and imagery are often used to illustrate the relationship between Christ and the Church, with believers being referred to as the bride of Christ. Proponents of the Feast of Pentecost rapture theory draw parallels between Jewish wedding traditions and the timing of the rapture. In ancient Jewish tradition, weddings typically occurred in 2 stages. First, the betrothal or engagement took place, which involved a legally binding agreement between the bridegroom and the bride. This stage was followed by a period of preparation, during which the bride would make herself ready for the bridegroom's arrival. Finally, the bridegroom would come to collect his bride, and the wedding feast would take place. Advocates of the Feast of Pentecost rapture theory argue that the rapture aligns with this wedding imagery. They see the church as currently being in the betrothal stage, awaiting the return of the bridegroom, Christ. They associate the Feast of Pentecost with the bridegroom's arrival to collect his bride and the subsequent wedding feast, suggesting that the rapture could occur during this time. However, it is noteworthy to add that there is another school of thought that says that the church is not the bride of Christ, rather Jerusalem. The basis of this thought is given by the verse in Revelation 21 verses 9 to 10, when John was carried in the Spirit to heaven and an angel told him, "Come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife." And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. People say, how can a city be a bride? The holders of this concept support it with the verse in Isaiah 62 verse 4, "For the Lord delights in you, and your land shall be married." I leave this for another day video. Subscribe, share and hit notification so you don't miss coming videos for God's glory. Furthermore, it is important to note that these concepts and interpretations rely on symbolism, typology, numerology, and cultural imagery. Different interpretations and beliefs exist within the Christian community regarding the timing of the rapture, and these arguments should be viewed as perspectives rather than definitive proof. In the Bible, Jesus was asked by the disciples the signs and time of his coming. He replied them in Mark 13 verse 32, saying, "But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father."